go. Okay, great. Roll. Hello, folks. Nice to see you again. I'm here this time. If you have a seat, Colin will bring you in too. I'm here this time to introduce you to Katsi White, who's the director of the Williams Center at Mount Greylock, out of the Office of the Center for Learning and Action. And with her will be Colin Ovitsky. Katsi's going to share with you some of the challenges that can use your help up at Mount Greylock. Two of them today, one related to scheduling up at the high school, and the other related to some work that happens every year with a math blast project that Williams faculty hosts for students at the high school. So together, Katsi and Colin will talk with you about the challenges associated with that and invite your help working through some of it. Katsi.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So as Paula said, I'm the director of the Williams Center at Mount Greylock. So I'm employed by Williams, but I spend a lot of time up at Mount Greylock helping them with everything from special projects on a weekly basis to we have about 40 Williams students who work up there in various capacities. So I know the school very well. All three of my kids went to the school, and one of the problems that they've wrestled with for many years is their schedule. And I'm sure most of you have come from high schools too, where you had kind of screwy, crazy schedules. The school day starts at about 7:40 and finishes at about 2:20. And there are no study halls, and there's 4 minutes passing time in between. So it's really class to class to class. Because we're a small school, we have limited offerings, just because there are not enough kids to take all the things that you could dream up that a high school student could take. There's 650 kids, 7 through 12. So we have a middle school and we have a high school. So the challenge is and I don't have this for projection, but I have actually 15 copies that I can pass around and you can share. The challenge is we have a bell schedule on the back, and we have a list of all of the electives and requirements that students have to take. So what we were hoping you or a group of you would help us determine a better schedule. So a schedule that would maximize choices for kids and allow them to take the maximum number of classes over their time at Mount Greylock. So in order to if you're interested in this project, I would invite you to come up and meet with the principal and the guidance counselor directly to sort of talk through the specifics of it. But I have a copy of the course catalog. I have the form that we use for course selection. A lot of it is done manually now because there are so many variables. And then I also have a list of all the courses that are offered at the school. So I have the 10th grade, the 11th grade, the 12th grade. We didn't include the 9th grade for some reason. I think we just left it off. And then the screwy bell schedule, which seems to kind of constrain everything. We can't extend the school day because that would mean that we would have to bring the union into it, and then that would therefore cost more money because minutes cost money in public schools. But we could change around potentially the duration of some of the classes too. So it could mean that we don't have a block schedule, so it could be that on certain days they're longer periods. So there is a fair amount of flexibility. Well, there isn't a fair amount of flexibility, but there is some flexibility within it. So anyways, so that's that project. And I can pass these around to anybody that's interested. Does anybody have any questions about that particular? One clarification.
Katsi, you said mostly done manually. Is there any current scheduling software?
Yeah. They use, I keep wanting to say PeopleSoft, but it's not PeopleSoft. It's PowerSchool. Yeah, they use PowerSchool. But there are a fair number of cases where it doesn't go far enough. It's done manually. So whether there can be a better solution, we would love to see if you guys can come up with something. That would be really great. And so I've got those, and you can pass it around, share it. And then I also have 2 copies of the course of study, which is kind of lengthy, so I didn't make copies, multiple copies.
Available online at all, or?
This is available online. Yeah. So maybe what I should do is give this to Steve, the program of studies. But the synopsis of all the classes is listed on the back of each page for each grade. And the only grade that's not included is 9th grade and then 7th and 8th grade. 7th and 8th grade, there are not a lot of choices. There are not a lot of electives. So we would probably be, in this project, we would probably be focusing on just 9 to 12. Okay, so you will serve Mount Greylock students well if you choose this project. The second project, and Colin is here to help me, is a project that all 10th graders, well, first of all, are there any questions on that particular project? You haven't gotten, yeah.
So what specifically are your goals for a new schedule? What do you want
Well, to maximize the number of electives that students can take, the number of courses that they can take during their time at Mount Greylock. And that may mean coming up with a different way of configuring the classes, right? But also keeping in mind that there are requirements that the kids, they're graduation requirements, so it's not all about the electives. It's, yeah.
Do you ever at any point in the year have a point where you ask the students what classes they'd be interested in taking independent of when they're offered? And so you might kind of know what their preferences are, even if two classes happen to happen at the same time?
No, we haven't done that. Good question, though.
Does the creation of the schedule happen then before they sign up for classes?
They have,
Or they sign up and then you create the schedule in order to minimize conflicts?
they sign up and then no. So the bell schedule, the way it is now, is the set version. Is that what you're asking? So we've been using that year to year to year.
Well, I'm saying like when the classes are like scheduled,
Yeah.
does that happen? Like, does the student sign up for biology at
Yeah.
9 a.m. or does he sign up
Oh.
for biology and then it turns out?
Yeah. Exactly. He signs up for biology, and then they shift it around currently to determine, maximum number of students that would be available at that time. But
They're trying to respond
Yeah.
to the demand.
yeah, they do, right. And so currently what happens sometimes is kids have to miss labs because of the way the schedule is set up. So that's kind of screwy.
You mentioned graduation requirements. Obviously, you can't change those. Are those
Right.
in here somewhere? Like how many years of?
They're in the course of study, which I can give you a link to online. Right. So there, for instance, there's 4 years of math. There's 4 years of English. There are 2 years of foreign language. There's 3 years of history. 4 years of, I say math. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever have more than one section for a certain class, or is it always trying to get everyone at the same time with the same professor?
We do have multiple sections. The class sizes generally don't go above 25, and they kind of like to keep them kind of in the 17 to 22 range. So if you had a class of 29, that would be too many. So, but yet they're not going to run a class if it's 7 or 4 or something. Yeah.
Do you have information on like how many faculty you could have teaching a number, how many classes? Because I know you don't
Yeah.
want to have like one teacher teaching for 9 periods a day. That might be a little tough. Or like the range of what they can teach. Like could they teach intro-bio and AP bio
Yeah.
and stuff like that? Do you have that information?
So we have that information, right. And teachers teach generally 5 periods a day. Sometimes they have more than 1 prep. Sometimes they have 2 preps, depending. But, the teachers at Greylock are, a teacher is never going to only have 2 classes, for instance. And they all, I think by union contract, they all have to have at least 1 prep a day. So they can't be scheduled for the whole day. Yeah.
Looks like the classes are scheduled so that they're at different times on different days. Is that
Right. So yeah.
is that seen as like a benefit to the schedule? Like, that
Um,
you want to be maintained?
It's debatable. So there's some people that like the idea of a rotating schedule because, for instance, if you have math before lunch, you might be more alert, whereas if you have it after lunch, you might be tired. And so the teachers like having the kids at different times of the day. So that's one school of thought. And then there's another school of thought that says, no, we want it at the same time every day because then it'll allow for us to maximize opportunities to do things in the community. Like if we know that there's math every day at 10 o'clock, for example, then we know that we could bring a Williams student in at 10 o'clock every day, or we could have somebody from the community come in. But I think there are people that like the idea of it rotating. So they've come up with a hybrid. For the first 3 periods are non-rotating, and the afternoon is rotating. Right? Yeah.
Following up on that question, are there certain things about the schedule that students and faculty really like that we want to keep, or certain things they hate and would be really willing to get rid of?
There's a lot of debate. So there are different camps. So there's some people that really like it the way it is. I think there's one concern that there's not enough lab time. So that is, I know one schedule has been introduced at one point where you have each class only meets for 4 days a week, and then you drop a class. So it's a rotating schedule, but for example, you'd have English 4 days, and then you drop it one day. It would be a different day each week. And there are some people that don't like that schedule because they say, oh, the kids would have more homework. So I think anything is possible, let's put it that way. And everybody is committed, has their heart set on one way, but it doesn't mean that we can't try new things. Yeah.
Is there like a minimum number of class hours that each class needs to meet?
Well, see, that's to follow up on hers. So currently it's 5 days a week, 40, whatever it is, 43 minutes, 44 minutes.
Just the school's policy? Or is that
It's not really a policy. It's seen currently as the best way to sort of maximize all the choices and the requirements. But I think that we could entertain something else. Yeah. The kids have to have 100. I mean, there are minutes in the year that have to be fulfilled, but in terms of minutes per class, per subject, I don't think there's a requirement on that. Did you have a question, Steve?
Do you right now try to block it up to have science going on at this time, English going on at this time, just all over the place?
All over the map.
Because teachers teach multiple science classes.
Right. I mean, we are small schools, so it's not that many. But for instance, bio, there might be 2 sections. For physics, there's honors and regular. So it's.
But I'm saying one teacher will be teaching 4 science classes, and there might be 3 or 4 different preps.
Yes.
So they can't do all their teaching at the same time, obviously.
Right.
'Cause it's
Right.
The teachers have to be more generalist in the
Yeah,
sense that they're
right.
teaching
Yeah.
a range, and they'll teach at different grade levels.
Right. I was
Yeah.
wondering if you try to get all the honors students taking their science at this block. How
Right.
much movement do you have between people in different levels?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know about that. Yeah.
That's not clear, those possibilities have even been explored.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Is something set in the schedule that you have 9 periods a day?
There's no rule that says that that has to be. It's the time, 7:40 to 2:25, whenever the last class gets over. That's the. And the other thing too is there's 4-minute passing time between classes too. So that's an interesting piece too. Yeah.
So they have to take 8, I think what the question was more like they have to take 8 classes per semester,
Yeah.
and that's set?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just briefly, I was looking at the course selection sheet and noticed that, like for English, they offer AP English language for juniors and then AP English literature for seniors.
Yep.
But are they not open to both classes, or does it strictly have to be that you take English language 1 year and then literature the next year?
That's the way. That's the sequence. That could be. I don't know whether that could be something that could be shifted around. I don't know whether the AP exam is set so you have to be in 11th grade to take. No. So you could take. Well, your question is, could you take currently senior English your junior year and vice versa?
At least the AP.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that's been explored. That's a good.
Are there enrollment preferences?
Meaning.
Meaning if the class is over-enrolled, how do you choose the students to enroll to?
There are, like for instance, this year AP Stats, which is our second year that we've offered it, was over-enrolled, and so preference was given to up to juniors and seniors, and those that had already taken AP Calc. So sometimes, yeah. And we also don't have any. There's no testing into APs, so APs are open, although the teacher will often, highly recommend that you either take it or not take it. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, 2 questions. What are early release and 2-hour delay days?
Okay, so early release is oftentimes on Wednesdays when there's teacher development. So I think once a month there'll be an early release, or once or twice a quarter there'll be an early release day. And then the 2-hour delays are usually if there's a snow emergency or some sort of a crisis or something, they'll delay it for 2 hours. And what it means is that the school day will still be counted in the number of minutes and days that you have required for the school year by the state of Massachusetts, but it just means that it's pushed back a bit.
And so, second question. Directed study lunch. What is the nature of that?
Okay, that's a good question. That was a period that was put into place a couple of years ago in an effort to try to build in a little bit of time during the day when students could get extra help, because currently there was no time for students to get extra help. A little bit of a study hall and for special groups to meet. In order for it to be considered time on learning in the state of Massachusetts, it can't be club time. It can't be, and it can't even really be study hall time. So directed study is kind of a way around that. So it's a way for a class to extend. So for instance, if they're doing a lab or they're doing a special project, they can extend the class during that period. Or we have a Spanish lunch table, for instance, during that time. So it's kind of it's only 20 minutes though. So.
Yep.
But that's fudgeable time at this point. So that could be.
Looks like it's half an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe a half an hour. Right.
But so that is the lunch period.
That is not the lunch period. So the way it's set up is the high school extended learning is tacked on. It is the middle school lunch, and the middle school extended learning is the high school lunch.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that that period could be used for labs.
Mm-hmm.
Do labs also happen in regular?
Yes.
times or not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. Yeah.
Just to clarify, is the boundary between middle school and high school, 9th grade is included in the middle school?
Middle school is 7th and 8th grade.
Okay,
Yep. Yeah. And we do have some middle schoolers who are taking high school classes, and that would be something that would maybe have to be factored in. Although that is pretty much there's so few of them that I think the focus should be on 9th through 12th here. Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing the schedule, how do you consider high school students who take classes at Williams? The other classes don't really line up with these.
Right. And that is a little bit complicated. Each year there may be 15 to 20, and typically those kids are well enough along in their academics that they end up missing something, and then they just have to make it up. So I don't think that necessarily should be part of this project. Yeah. Yes.
So students are taking 8 classes a semester. Where does that ever come from? Just like, is that a requirement?
Well, they have their requirements, and then when they fulfill their requirements, then there's spaces left over for electives. And the thing is, they can't have free periods, so they can't have a period where I know at my high school you could have a free period, so they have to fill it in with something. So whether it's an independent study or whether it's an elective Williams class.
That's like a graduation requirement. They do 8 courses a semester.
That's something that I might have to have clarified. My understanding is the graduation requirements actually are a lot fewer classes. So to graduate from Mount Greylock, most of the kids that graduate from Mount Greylock have far exceeded their graduation requirements. But they don't, because the school doesn't allow for kids to just be wandering around in the halls, they have to fill up their time somehow. Does that make sense?
Actually, there is time on learning.
There is, yeah. So it's this.
School as a whole.
Yeah, so it goes back to this 180 minutes a year that kids have to spend on learning. And so, plus the school, 180 days? Oh yeah, 180 days. Yeah, that does it.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 990
Yeah,
hours.
900, right, yeah. Multiply it out. Right. So, and the other thing is that in the past they have allowed for free periods, and then the kids have wandered the halls and wreaked havoc. And so there's a little bit of, there's that. So there's that piece of it, is the school being nervous about it. There's the other piece of it, is making sure everybody is engaged to the degree that they possibly can. So if you were to,
So
I
this
think,
is also staffing constraints, so that's
Yeah,
the thing you talked about. That
Yeah.
There are certain limits, even if you could say that you found that a lot of students in a given year wanted to take certain kinds of courses, there'd be staffing implications
Yeah,
potentially. So
yeah.
there are staffing constraints that will have to be taken into account for all this.
Yeah.
That does play into the whole directed study, free periods. Because
Right.
usually in schools where they have those, you have to be doing something. Someone's watching over
Yeah, you need kind of an advisor. You need something. Right. So to answer your question, they have to be engaged all day long. Right. They can't have just down or periods where they're not doing anything, or no adult is looking over them. Yeah. You guys have good questions. Okay, so PE is interesting. PE occurs every day. My kids had PE every single day for from grade 7 through 12. That's been moderated a little bit, and now the labs are poaching a little bit from that time. So that is seen as somewhat of a flexible time, but we have a lot of PE at our school.
Is it like one of the 9?
Yes. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So what's the biggest objection to, instead of requiring 8 courses a semester, just requiring 5 or 6 and having them be in larger blocks of time, 4 days a week?
Because some teachers are saying they don't want to teach that long because the kids will get, antsy. That's too long a time for a student to be sitting in a classroom, an hour and a half. I personally, I won't get into it. Yeah, I think it allows for more creativity on the teacher's part, and it allows for project-based learning, but not everybody is there yet. But I think it could be experimented with. Right? Yeah.
So my high school also went through a schedule change my last 2 years there, but
Yeah.
in the end, we ended up with a schedule where instead of having we had a once a week, a class would have a sort of double class period.
Yeah.
So the science classes use that as a sort of a lab type thing,
Yep.
and then other classes use that as sort of like the project-based learning. Or are teachers opposed to the idea of any sort of double length class periods, or is it a once every so often would be okay, or?
It has there is. I mean, except for the extended learning, we haven't really done anything with the block scheduling. So I think that's a possibility. Let's put it that way. So.
So it sounds like a modified block.
It's a modified block, right.
Do you generally have students signing up for more than one lab course, or just one?
It's generally one lab. We do have some that their senior year will double up, but that is hard to do with the current schedule, right? And it doesn't really occur until senior year, when they've fulfilled all their other requirements, so they have space.
I just want to make sure that this is a hard constraint. You can't have something that's like a study hall for math, where people would come in, there would be a teacher, and they would spend that block of time doing their math homework.
You could. It would be called extended. It would have to be called extended something or other.
But you could use something like that to have something like a study hour during the day. But would you be able to have students from different math classes in it?
I think you could. And I'm not the principal, so, whoops. Yeah, she couldn't be here, and so any follow-up would have to be with her. But I think, based on the concept of extended learning, you could have an extended math situation or a resource situation.
If you put stuff like that in, that would decrease the number of people potentially taking some of these extra classes, which would remove demands for something like that. You could then put all these people together in one block from different classes from a scheduling perspective. And then for students who have all these activities after school, it would give them a chance to get some of their work done rather than maybe doing an activity they don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to see if this is a possibility.
I can't answer that 100%. I can get back to you, but
I can just go across the street.
you can just talk to your neighbor and ask her. Yeah. I think you could. I think you could. Yeah, I think you could.
I think the
Yeah.
clause would be subject to the other constraints in the system. That's something that really could be
Yeah.
considered.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's virtual high school, and could that potentially add more periods or classes in the schedule?
Well, that could be something that could be done outside of school, like an independent study too. So virtual high school is an online resource. So students can, we have a couple of students over the past, like Paula's daughter took virtual high school in Italian, I believe. And so basically it's an extra course. You get credit for it. There are assessments. In some cases, they meet with Williams students as TAs.
Just to make sure we have time for the other presentation, why don't we take 2 more questions and
Okay.
then shift gears?
Okay. Yes.
So what you said the biggest problem is with this current setup is that it's too time intensive for reliably underperforms in some kind of aspect to care about.
I think that I think it's rigid. I think it's very rigid. It doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility for for a teacher to expand or contract a lesson plan. I think it is also for the students. It doesn't allow for that many electives or for that much choice. So I think that those are the 2 major constraints, I would say. Yeah.
So if you were to have sort of 3 major objectives for a newly structured schedule, what would be your 3 top priorities?
Okay, so this is me. Again, we might have to double check with Mary on this, but I would say maximizing electives, maximizing lab time, and allowing for some block flexibility, so that I would agree. I would think that those would be the 3. So we want it all, basically. And I do think, I mean, this is a little bit out of the box, and maybe this is something that, Mary does have to be brought in on talking about. But this notion of virtual high school and independent studies, I think is really interesting because I think it can be done outside of the school day. Some of it can be done outside of the school day, which would then free up a period during the day for other things. But that may be stepping a little bit too far out. Okay? Okay, so I would say the next step, if anybody's interested in this project, that they should, through Steve, contact me, and then I'll arrange for a meeting for you to go up and talk to the principal and the guidance counselor who can dig into it more with you, even in a preliminary way. We could do that. Okay? So the second project is another project that I run. I don't run the schedule, but I run this. It's called Math Blast, and all the 10th graders come to Williams for a day. And the math department, the wonderful math department here, puts on a day of workshops it's a morning of workshops for all of our 10th graders and the 10th graders at BART. And the idea is it's kind of real life, applied, exciting, fun math. So I think in the past we've had 6 offerings, and the students each get to choose 3 workshops. So this is much more straightforward than the schedule. So basically what they do is they get a little flyer, and Colin will explain it because he's the one that is doing all the backside for me. They look through it all, and then they choose 3. They rank their choices 1 to 6. And they're going to get one of their top 3 choices in their list of 3 final workshops. So last year we did a system whereby they signed up online, and then Colin had worked out some sort of a fancy thing where there was a spreadsheet, and then all of a sudden these lists appeared, and it was really great for me because in the past I had done it I'd hand done it all over my living room with sheets of paper and 100 kids and like making these class lists. And so anyways, each class is roughly 10 students. Each student will get at least 1 or 2 of their top 3 choices out of 6. And I like to have it balanced pretty evenly between BART and Mount Greylock students. And then usually at the end I have the teacher take a look at it to make sure that there aren't a lot of bad actors with bad actors, and it's going to be a bad mix. So we do a little bit of hand mixing at that point. But Colin, do you want to talk about how you did it? And I can pass out the summary of Math Blast too. Oh yeah, so, yep.
And then you can switch the
How do
beautiful green light.
to,
Oh, your little controller.
Oh, yeah.
your cursor can go to
you
column.
take that, and then display on. There we go. Okay, and there's
All right.
that link.
Great. Tight clip. All right, good morning, everyone. So just to start, so over here we have, this is the list that was offered last year in terms of the different workshops. So there were actually, I guess, 7 choices last year, and the schedule, the description of each one. And then, so the form was just very simple. Last year, I think, was that the first year that BART was included? Or they'd been included in the past? But so, name, we didn't even separate between first and last name, which might be worth doing going forward. School was down to 2, just the 2 choices. We're trying to reduce the number of variables when they're filling out the form. Teacher could probably be pre-populated with a drop-down list as well, so that some people spelled their teachers' names wrong. So we had to fix those. And then just a choice, all 7 of the workshops available in choices 1 through 6. Luckily, we never actually got to the 5th and 6th choice fields last year, which was helpful. After that, so we have, let's see, I'm going to download it because it doesn't display quite right in the preview here. So from the form submissions, we ended up with this as basically our raw data.
How many students are we talking about?
That's a good, so I don't know how many. They're close to 120 total between the 2 schools, roughly.
Let's see, so this turned into, yeah, they're about 113 here. So this is what we end up with from the form. Then we went through and it had a couple different ways that we manipulated the spreadsheet from there. We had an alphabetized list of students. Then we sorted it by the school and the teacher for each school, so that I think this was done primarily so that the teachers could double check from their class list who had and had not yet submitted the form, so they could follow up on that. Then from there, just download this file too.
Sorry, what is BART?
BART is the Berkshire Arts and Technology Charter School. It's in Adams. It's a smaller charter school. So from there, what we did, and I'm sure there are, and this is obviously your challenge, there would be a way to do this in a less manual way than what I did, and using formulas or some other arrangement in order to do these various levels of sorting that we did. So first we sorted by first choice and found all the people that had chosen a certain workshop as their first choice, and as I went through, I color coded the cells so that I could keep track of, as I moved things around, different choice levels. Then we sorted by second choice, keeping the colors from the first choice, adding this as a second choice, and then so on third choice, fourth choice. And luckily, as I mentioned, we didn't have to get to 5th or 6th choice because we were able to fulfill each student with 3 different workshops with no more than 3 of their, or 4, but without having to go any deeper than their 4th choice. From there, we started filling in so these are the different workshops and the different times. So we basically tried to, whenever possible, give every student their first choice. In some cases, some of the more popular workshops filled up before we could get everybody in there with their first choice. There was also an attempt to balance Mount Greylock and BART students to some extent. Mount Greylock has more students, but we're trying to get a mixture of students from both schools in each workshop. So essentially, just went through and started pasting students in from these different choice levels until the workshops were full. Certain workshops, I think, had a higher capacity for students than others, so that was another variable to keep in mind. And eventually, we got everybody in with their first, second, third choices. A couple of people we had to fill in with their fourth choice here, because in addition to trying to match the choices for the students, we were also trying to get enough students into each workshop for the workshop to run. And certain, for example, this invalid inversions workshop did not run during the third time because there wasn't enough interest to fill it in that particular case. So, and then we basically just have the final roster for each workshop, taking away the color coding and all those other pieces, and this is what was then printed. And part of that, once we finished this sheet, basically did a manual find for each student's name to make sure that each student did indeed have 3 different workshops at 3 different times, wasn't doubly booked at any time, and wasn't doubling up on any particular workshop. So just by finding that student's name, just a quick scan when it highlighted the cell to see that it moved across and down. And so that was sort of just a double check move, but again, certainly something that I would imagine would be able to be done in a more automated way somehow. So that's the gist of what kind of information we collected and what we're trying to end up with, and the steps that we took manually in between. Yeah.
So what's the reason you have just let them go to what's offered and just have your lectures be open?
Primarily due to a few different issues. One, capacity. Each workshop is really only effective for a certain number of students. Maybe some I have an ideal number of 10, some are 15, some are 20. So they need to be assigned ahead of time. The other is certainly the balance of trying to keep a balance and get the students to integrate between the 2 schools. And also, as Kasi mentioned, if there are any behavioral concerns, you might end up with groups of students just sort of sticking together and migrating, to the different workshops as a group and potentially being, problem causers within the workshop.
Okay, so they're not just lectures, they're also workshops.
Yeah, the idea is that they're, a small group of kids can ask questions and interact with each other.
So again,
it's interesting because some years, some of the kids' parents are actually teaching the classes, and so we'll have like this migration of kids who all want to go to culinary, not theory class. Mix it up.
Yeah.
Are all kids equal in this process? For example, do some have demonstrated previous interest or have relationships with polymaths? Do they have precedence?
No, everybody's taken equally, and in terms of to what level we can apply people's first choices, that was really the only thing that I took into account in that was the timestamp on the registration. If somebody registered early, so I tried to. So that's how this is originally sorted by the time of registration. As you can see, it's also kind of a quick turnaround because registration opens typically right after Thanksgiving, I think, and then the workshops run this first week of December, so there's a short window of when all the registrations come in, and then a quick turnaround time before they actually happen. But again, that would be the only sort of preferential factor I would take into account is, if they got their registration in early, I'd try to get them into their first choice workshop more so than somebody who registered later.
How long does it take you right now to do this by hand?
It was pretty time consuming. I don't know, I don't have an exact number, but you know, as you can see, just sort of doing these different manipulations of the spreadsheet and sorting through it, it became, you know, during that time between Thanksgiving and the workshop, became sort of probably the majority of, you know, of my days for a couple of for a week or two there. Yeah.
As far as the method of deciding who, based on their ordered choices, goes into what class, that is taken care of.
In terms of deciding?
It's just based on timestamp.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, you know, to the extent possible, we want to fulfill as many people's first choice as possible. And then, the other thing I did look at too is if I couldn't give them their first choice, I tried really hard to get them into their second choice. I didn't want anybody to only get into their third choice or lower selection. So actually, I did preference. Once I had all the workshops filled with people's first choices, if there were people that didn't get any of their first choices, I started with them with the second choice sort to make sure I got all of them into their second choice workshop before filling those workshops with other people.
But it doesn't have to be timestamped. It was just, that was a function, because it does look there, it's possible that the teachers who signed up these students signed them all up or had them all sign up in a given chunk of time. Sort of, you know,
they could have done it.
No, it's not
right.
It's just it was a useful heuristic device.
Yeah.
It's not essential that that variable be stuck with. If somebody could come up with an algorithm, for example, that would slot people using all the other variables.
Right.
Have you considered slightly different metrics where, for instance, each student gets 100 points to allocate between, or 60 points to allocate between the different workshops? Because maybe someone's second choice and fourth choice, maybe they're really indifferent between them.
Right. Yeah, and I think that would be a great way to evaluate it, I think, because in a lot of cases, I think they might have had one or two that they were actually interested in, and then 3 through 6 they just kind of threw in, you know. And we also, we didn't have a system within the form to prevent, you know, putting the same workshop for your 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th choice, because there just wasn't really the Google Forms didn't really have a method for doing that. So a point allocation, more than just a rank scale, you know, could certainly be a way of approaching it. Yeah.
What we wanted to avoid was kids just signing up with their friends. So really reading the descriptions and thinking about what might interest them. So.
Yes?
Do you have any way to make sure that people can't sign up other people for, like, just put them the wrong name, or is that just?
Not necessarily. Not at the moment. There's not a. We did see. I think I saw 1 or 2 that came in with multiple registrations, and I just deleted the second one, essentially as being a duplicate. In most cases, it was the same information. They just might have hit submit twice, or they had it cached on their browser and didn't realize they'd already sent it in, something like that. Any other questions? Great. So again, this is something that, you know, Katsu's done for years on paper, and, you know, we tried to do a quick shift to doing it online last year, and this is, and the time that we had was what I came up with. But there's certainly probably, I would say, a fair amount of room for flexibility and adaptation to different system. You know, maybe subject to what the forms can actually capture in terms of the way those are structured for the different fields that we can take in on the form. So, great. Thank you.
And I assume you want this by math class this year.
That would be great, yeah.
Yeah, and that's right. So that means you have to Thanksgiving, and then a little bit of Thanksgiving. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.